Good afternoon. I am Maria Lloyd from the Army Community Covenant Office. We are part of Headquarters Department of the Army at the Pentagon. And thank you for inviting me to come today and give you an update on where we are with the Army Community Covenant. Most of you, has anybody in here been involved in a community covenant signing? Because we've had covenant signings in every state. I have a list in my bag if you want to see the covenants that have been signed in your state. I was up in Massachusetts about 2 years ago, and I'm going to tell you a success story that we had in Massachusetts. We've had over 800 community covenant signings to date. And if we could go to the next slide. So this is an example of a community covenant document. This happens to be Croton, Massachusetts. And communities draft and design the document that they want to sign with their local military. So each one's a little bit different. And I have samples. If anybody gets to the point where they want to sign a community covenant, I can certainly give you examples of language that's been used in the past. So the community covenant was created in April 2008 by then Secretary of the Army Guerin. And what he wanted to do was to create a platform that communities could celebrate success and support their local service members. And thus we have the community covenant. It started with community covenant signings near Army installations. And within the first couple of months, we had over 100 Army installations sign covenants with their local communities. And since that time, as the program's evolved, it now includes the geographically dispersed, which is where you all come in. Although I do work for the Army, the program supports all services. Some communities will call it the Military Community Covenant, the Armed Forces Community Covenant. So whatever the community wants to call it is up to them. Next slide. This is our slide on joining community forces. So as you can see, all these organizations come together. They want to build a network, whether we call it a collaborative group, community action team, whatever we want to call the group that comes together. They meet and they decide how they want to support their local service members. And they have different ways of doing that. First, they have to identify the needs. And in the last presentation I gave, the best example that I have is in Texas, Brownsville, Texas, which is near the border. The community wanted to support their service members, but they didn't know what the needs of the community were. So they rented a billboard on the side of the road. They invited the military to a town hall. The military and families came. And what they learned during this town hall meeting was the number one concern of this community was safety for family members while they had a spouse deployed. So the local police department was there, and they decided that they were going to increase patrols through these neighborhoods. So that's an outcome of a community covenant and how these groups have come together, form these collaborative groups. They identify what the needs are, and then they provide that support. Next slide. So this is a picture of an event that I went to in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. So Chelmsford signed a community covenant, not with the Army, but with their local Air Force base. And what they did is, about 14 months after they signed the community covenant, they wanted to bring the volunteers who had been supporting their local service members with those service members, because a lot of them had never met before. And they wanted to celebrate successes. And what we heard from the service members that were there, that having the support group while they were deployed was very important to them, knowing that their family was taken care of. And the funny example from this particular signing was the wife was at home, and a tree had fallen on her house, and she didn't know what to do. So she had called the community covenant, the collaborative group, asked if they could provide support, and so they sent someone out to help. So that's another example of community covenants in action and a best practice. And the last slide is how you all can become involved. So joining community forces is creating this collaborative group or this network of support. And I hope you'll consider, if you're involved in that the community covenant could be a platform, a symbolic commitment from the community to their local service members. And on the back of this brochure, which I think I gave to every state, is my phone number. So if you get to the point where you need more information, you want to sign a community covenant, you're not quite sure if it's time yet, please call me, Maria Lloyd, and I can walk you through the process. I can provide examples of what's been done in the past. And I want to close with one more example in Utah. Several years ago, Utah formed a 6-person community covenant team, and they were National Guard, and they went from community to community, signing community covenant signings, and as a result, each community decided to defer utility costs while their service member was deployed. So that's another outcome of community covenant. So it's more than just a covenant signing. There are outcomes associated with the covenant signing. So I look forward to hearing from you, and I think we're going to open it up to questions if you have community covenant questions or Army One Source questions. Thank you. No questions?
Where's the music from Jeopardy?
I have a question. Is there a way that we can access a community covenant banner to hold in front of, like when we do a photo op whenever we're doing a community covenant? Is there a way that we can have access to a banner for that?
I can ship you a banner, but I needed to get it back. Okay. So I have some, if you contact me, I can ship it to you as long as we get it back. I think we have 3 or 4 in the office. They do not say Army, they're just community covenant. They're good for any event.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about, I know majority of the community covenants have been based around either towns or cities. Have you found a lot of successes with them being based in like county or in a more of a regional base versus, because I'm finding that they're happening, they're not sustaining themselves.
Well, we heard that this morning. How do you sustain all these networks? And that's sometimes a difficult question. One of the things that we're trying to do through Community Covenant is it should really be community-based, so someone in the community should lead the effort. And we need to find that champion that's willing to do that. In Florida, we have a great example. She's been doing this for 3 years. This is her full-time job. She doesn't get paid for it. She's a volunteer. Community is defined however you want to define it. So some states do it by city, some do it by county. In Michigan, we just had a community covenant signing on September 11th where they included 6 counties in their covenant signing. But eventually they want to have a covenant signing in each individual county. So, you know, it's different for each state.
I want to take just a quick whack at it, because what I heard in the question is what does it take to sustain these efforts?
Well, the big, I think you hit it right there, is the person that probably is there doing the big amount of work. In many cases, either moves on to a new job or moves from a town. So
getting past personality-driven and to a sustained program, I think you got to focus on a couple of things. One is the real outcomes question, and is there work that's mattering to change lives that people can celebrate? People, in order to sustain this effort, you have to be able to celebrate making a difference in people's lives. The other piece is connecting the work to business as usual for someone. And the county level is really smart, I think, because states are organized differently, but when you look at county social services systems or the number of county agencies and county government and that infrastructure, being able to put this work for the long haul in systems that are going to sustain rather than individual people's passion is part of the transition to sustain. So I'd be looking for that.
The other thing that Annette mentioned this morning in Minnesota is if you have this group, they're ready to go, they're very enthusiastic. One, if they can't identify the military and their families in the community, then sometimes that has a negative effect on the group. And the second thing is they need something substantial to do. So if you go weeks or months without providing support, then their interest also wanes. So the other thing that we've tried doing, and what we did in Chelmsford actually, is we presented them with an award. And it's a civilian award that can be signed 05 and above, I believe. And it's very easy to do. And they just think it's great when they have someone in uniform come out and present them an award. And that also re-energizes the group. So we're trying that also. But it's a tough question. And there's, yes?
You mentioned that a community could be geographic.
Yes.
It could also be like organizations. Because sometimes we try to do that. We bring in a lot of organizations that have similar focuses, and we try to cut down on redundancy, so it brings them together for the same goal.
It can. In California is a good example. They have several collaborative groups. One supports military children. Another supports military spouses. Then we have a couple collaborative groups that support wounded warriors. So yes, it could be like what we ask with the community covenant's hard to do because we're at the program office and we can't dictate what the communities do, but we ask when they sign a covenant there should be some type of measurable outcome or some type of action plan. It's more than a community covenant signing. It started out as that, but now we want to see, and what we would like to see is this joining community forces or this collaborative group, this community support network created as a result of a community covenant signing. A sustainable network.
I want to give sort of two other examples that are in the professional community. In Kansas, and they thought about it at a statewide level, but they patched together in a formal collaborative approach, legal aid, a couple of university law schools, and the Kansas Bar Association around both recruiting and training and deploying pro bono legal volunteers to the military community. And there are lots of learnings underneath that, but potentially they could have used a community covenant, the covenant signing, as an anchor for that professional collaborative. The other one that came to mind when you asked the question, the association that represents chiropractors nationally took on a big effort to raise the awareness of chiropractors nationally and push training through their systems. And a covenant relationship would have been an ideal one for that. And that could happen locally as well.
And if you look at the brochure that I gave you, these photos that you see were taken in Chelmsford. And these are photos of volunteers that went out to beautify this house of the service member that was deployed. It was right before he was getting home. So it's a lot of times the collaborative groups are very grassroots. Right in your local community, they'll get their hands dirty, whatever needs to be done. Any last question?
I have one last one for our Army One Source, and it was mentioned before about the fact that New England lost the representative in the area. Is it something that you can address as to why, and if there's a possibility of a position coming back, or is it, I'm not sure if you're the right.
So, as a government manager, yes, ma'am, we are in the process right now of, we went through a recompete for the contract. So we've changed vendors. The contracting office actually awarded it to a new vendor. And so we're now re-looking at all the populations, at the work that's being done or that has been done for fiscal year 14, and seeing where we need to make placements. So right now we're strategizing and trying to get because the contract was just awarded. So we're looking at that. So you're saying that you want a replacement for New England, is that it?
Well, we had one for years.
Yeah.
Yes.
We used to have one in every state, and then it went down to the region, and now, as you said, the closest one's in Pittsburgh. One of the things that, and I'll throw her name out because she was awesome, Tammy Mosier.
Yeah.
What she provided for us, she was able to come in and work with the people in our state who were the points of contact in your 4 basic areas. And she was able to build coalitions with that. And we've got those, and we're still trying to maintain it, and we're still working with it. But having her as that outside point and that source of information is absolutely invaluable.
Absolutely, and Tammy has been with us for a long time, and she's invaluable. The new vendor is making assessments, and then they have to do, of course, we can't dictate. And we're a performance-based contract, which means we develop the scope of work, and then the vendor determines the requirements that need to go against that. So we're doing everything that we can to influence that, but again, as a government, we can't dictate. We can only dictate the workload and the scope of responsibilities, and then we'll go from there. But we do have a lot of negotiations going on at this time, so don't hold your breath right now. Just give us a couple of weeks to kind of reset, because that's what we actually are doing, trying to reset. We did have 61 state community coordinators across the country. But the fiscal environment has changed, right? The landscape has changed for all of us. So therefore we had 17, and what we did was we employed the recruiting command's model of having a geographical landscape that was a little bit bigger. So all of our CSCs our state community support coordinators had a 2 to 3 state geographical area that they were responsible for. Tammy was exceptional and did a phenomenal job, and of course those coalitions. And that's one good thing that you said, we're still maintaining. That's when we knew we were on to something really good, because when we had to reduce the number of contractors on board, we realized that we had, those state plan of actions were really working, because they went past that personality that initiated that action. So with your help and all the right stakeholders in place, we were able to maintain some momentum. But we are negotiating, and that process is being done. We just can't necessarily dictate to the contractor or the vendor.
Well, just in scope of work, put the word New England.
So let me just comfort you. We entered in the historical data. It was an exhibit that had all of the previous locations and where we would like that, but we couldn't dictate, but we could say historical data. Here's where we found to had good traction. And so hopefully they'll take that into account. So.
Well, if you need a letter of recommendation, just
Absolutely. Thank you for your support.
Okay, we out of time? Okay. Thank you, everyone. And you have our contact number for both organizations if you have follow-up questions. Okay. Thank you.